In a century riddled with unrest, World War II remains the epic tale. An event of unparalleled impact. Even now, we are uncovering new information about secret weapons and villainous tactics, about extraordinary heroism and boundless shame, about a time when one life, or one bullet, or one bomb separated infamy and glory, defeat and victory, tyranny and freedom. Untold stories of World War II. On the 16th of July, 1945, a bomb exploded in the American desert. A very different kind of bomb. The furious energy of the atom had been unleashed. That power might have landed in the wrong hands had a few brave men not waged a secret war against Germany's atomic program. At the height of the Second World War, Germany's Nazi Party marched toward global domination, led by its ambitious, remorseless leader. Adolf Hitler had the will to conquer the world. All he needed was the weapon. And he had found the means to make one in the most unlikely place. It was here, in the snow-packed mountains of Norway, that a handful of soldiers on skis fought to stop Hitler's dream of possessing the ultimate weapon. Old men now, they remember how they risked their young lives for the cause of liberty.
They would stop at nothing in order to conquer the world. So the feeling they had to be stopped became very, very strong.
We were quite certain that if we were caught by Germans, we were all being executed.
It would take 3 daring attempts before they succeeded. April 9th, 1940. German warships penetrated Oslo Fjord. The Blitzkrieg had come to Norway. Within 2 months, the besieged nation was forced to surrender.
Well, it took some time to realize it, actually, but when autumn 1940 came and the darkness came in over Norway, you suddenly realized that it was not the same Norway you had the year before. To understand it, you need to have the experience of being occupied. To live in an occupied country is the most distressing thing you can do.
A vast occupying army flooded the country. The Nazis now controlled all aspects of Norwegian life.
No, actually a war between each Norwegian and each German. We had to do the best out of it. I think that was the common opinion. Inside, of course, most Norwegians hated them.
They introduced Gestapo in Norway when they understood that resistance was coming. Started arresting people, torturing people, killing people, etc., etc. And then we suddenly understood what an occupation meant to the people.
Hitler's grasp extended into every corner of the country. In this remote Norwegian valley, the Germans seized a very special prize: the Norsk Hydro factory. Surrounded by mountains, the factory had been built on the face of a cliff overlooking a deep and impassable gorge. For the Nazis, it was an ideal location for a wartime project, difficult to bomb and easy to defend. But to the generals in Berlin, Norsk Hydro offered even more. In 1940, it was the only hydroelectric plant in the world producing large amounts of an extremely rare substance, deuterium oxide, also known as heavy water. As soon as they took control of the plant, production went into high gear. When word reached Great Britain, a powerful sense of foreboding swept through the Allies. As the most likely target for a German A-bomb, Britain faced the greatest peril.
Is it possible they do not realize that we shall never cease to persevere against them until they have been taught a lesson which they and the world will never forget?
Winston Churchill's spirited defiance of the Nazis became a rallying point for resistance fighters from all over conquered Europe. Young Norwegians, eager for combat, joined the army of exiles gathering in Britain.
There was no sacrifice that was too big to try to get the Germans out.
Clean rifle. Well done.
The British created a secret organization, the Special Operations Executive, to fan the fires of resistance.
You volunteered and you were trained by the British to go back to Norway and work behind the lines on sabotage, instruction, reporting, radio information, wireless operating, and that sort of thing.
A few young resistance fighters would return to Norway undercover, armed with a plan to destroy the heavy water factory. They were country boys and city kids, engineers and outdoorsmen, university students and career soldiers. Shock troops in a clandestine war against Hitler's A-bomb. They would become legends in their homeland. And some of them would even star in this 1948 movie, chronicling their real-life exploits. Scenes from this film give a revealing glimpse of the daring mission. October 18th, 1942. 4 of the men returned home in a dangerous night parachute jump. Their mission, to guide a British explosives team to the heavy water plant.
When we were leaving for the dropping zone, you felt that some of the people sending you didn't expect to see you once more. So we had to more or less to cheer them up and say it's not this easy to get rid of us. We will be back. Just wait and see. Our target is the heavy water production. That was all. They said it's important and we have to destroy it.
I knew that heavy water was important for the Germans' weapon production, but in which way, I had no idea.
The commandos' first objective was to establish a secret landing field on the Hardangervidda, a huge plateau north of the factory. Crossing that bleak expanse, the Norwegians took over an empty cabin and made radio contact with England. The operation could begin. For the first sortie, the British sent a force in gliders towed by bombers, a plan that needed clear weather. But over Norway, clouds, winds, and snow had cut visibility to near zero. For the Norwegians on the ground, the flight had become a disaster waiting to happen.
I tried to get connection with England and warn them, but at that time it wasn't possible. And then suddenly I heard interference in my headphones, and I knew they were not far away. And shortly after we also heard the engines of the aircraft. And it came dead on us, passed over us, and disappeared. After about half an hour, the next plane with a glider came, and it came right to us correctly, turned, and went away.
The British troops never arrived at the rendezvous point.
We got a message from London that both gliders and one of the Halifaxes had crashed in the mountains. So that was the end of the freshman operation. It was a complete disaster.
The soldiers who survived the crash were rounded up and executed. The Allies' secret war against the heavy water factory was now exposed. To avoid detection, the commandos withdrew deeper into the Hardangervidda. For weeks, perhaps months, they would have to live off a land where little existed but snow and ice.
When this mission on the gliders failed, we had actually no supplies for further stay in the mountains. So we were dependent upon reindeer. But at that moment, there were few or no reindeer at all in our area because of the wind directions.
It was so very difficult to get to the reindeers. But the day before Christmas, Jens, he shot the reindeer. Jens learned that if you take the stomach of a reindeer, you get vitamins from the reindeer moss. So we cut up the stomach and took out the reindeer moss or the contents and mixed it with blood and everything and made a nice porridge mixed with brain. And we were eating it, and it probably saved our lives. So Christmas Eve, we had a real fine party.
We chatted. We had a good time at Christmas Eve. I remember well.
You know your comrades outside and inside. Do you know what he is going to say before he opens his mouth? They had endurance. They had a will to hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to hold on.
They would have to hold on through the darkest months of winter. But each day, the Nazi supply of heavy water was growing, drop by precious drop. London had to make a move. A second Norwegian squad, specially trained in explosives, would drop onto the Hardangervidda and join their comrades in an assault on the heavy water plant. February 16th, 1943. Under cover of night, the 6 new men landed. Now the commandos were ready to strike a blow against Hitler's A-bomb, if they could penetrate the factory's formidable and deadly defenses. To the commandos, the heavy water plant appeared impervious to attack. To reach the factory, the saboteurs had to cross a deep, narrow gorge. There was only one road in, over a suspension bridge. And the bridge was patrolled 24 hours a day by German soldiers. Any direct assault would be doomed. But the chasm itself, with its steep, icy wall, lay unguarded.
Some of us said we thought it was rather impossible to cross that gorge, but it was decided that one should go down and find out. In daylight, I went down into the valley. I climbed down the gorge, crossed the river, and started climbing up on the other side. And then the same way back, up to my friends up in the mountains, and told the facts that it was possible to cross the gorge.
You felt that this may be serious, very serious for you, and you accepted that you might not come through. And we climbed down the river and up on the other side, and our plan was to get in position for the attack by 11:30, because at 12 o'clock at night there was a guard shift down on the suspension bridge. We wanted to see the German guards being relieved, coming up in the factory area and enter the barracks before we went inside.
We all thought we would be discovered when we forced the gate, but nothing happened.
Two of us carried a full set of charges. In case one should be shot, there should always be reserve.
The task for the demolition team: to attach explosives to the heavy water cells located in a basement room. Meanwhile, their comrades on lookout waited. Each passing moment increased the chance of discovery.
If we had been discovered, I knew that during such circumstances you will have to act. So they shoot. If a shot would, of course, maybe spoil the whole operation.
Inside, they overpowered a Norwegian workman. Holding him at gunpoint, the saboteurs placed their charges, pausing only to decide how much time they would need to escape before the blast. Suddenly, they were interrupted by their captive.
He broke in and said, "It's all right, you may blow the factory, that's all right, but may I have my glasses, because it's hopeless to get no glasses in Norway today." And you would have thought that you probably said, "Damn your glasses, you have no time for looking for glasses." But instead you dropped what you were doing and you searched all around the room, and you found the holster for his glasses and gave him, and he said, "Thank you very much." And so we went on with taping the fuses.
So far, they had beaten the odds. Now the commandos had only seconds to make their escape.
And after a few minutes, 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes, they were there with us on the railway line. And we ran the same way back as we had come in.
The road condition and the snow condition were excellent, because on the railway quite a lot of the snow had blown away on the outer side, and that was frozen solid ground, and we didn't put a mark. So everything was actually on our side.
With determination, skill, and daring, the saboteurs had dealt a crippling blow to their enemy without losing a man. But heavy water had become a German priority, and within 6 months, the factory was back in operation. The Allies had to assume the worst. Nazi scientists were closer than ever to building a bomb. Another attack on the factory was set in motion. this time from the air. In a bold noonday raid, 176 American bombers hurled destruction at the plant. The raid damaged factory buildings and killed civilians in a nearby shelter. But the heavy water, secured in the basement, went untouched. With production halted, the Germans decided to move the operation to the safety of the fatherland, and inadvertently gave the commandos one last chance to destroy it forever.
We had got information from London that the Germans had planned to take down the remaining heavy water.
Team members secretly scouted the route. The heavy water would be loaded onto railway cars and taken by train to Lake Tincha. Here, the cars would go aboard a passenger ferry for the 2-hour trip across the lake. A well-placed charge could sink the ferry, and with it, all the heavy water. But sinking a public ferry meant paying a terrible price.
Our conclusion was that the sinking of the ferry was about the only possible solution. It would have to be civilian sabotage, which was naturally a very serious thing to deal with. There was no doubt in our mind that there were going to be human lives taken. And furthermore, it could be anybody. And Rjukan was a small town, and it was really almost like all family.
Fearing neighbors and friends might die, the Norwegians sent an urgent message to London. The British reply was immediate and uncompromising.
It has been talked over, and the conclusion is the heavy water has to be destroyed. Good luck. And when you get such a message from London, you have to do it.
Not to be drastic, but anybody in my family was scheduled to go on that ferry. I couldn't do anything about it.
The Germans never put any guards on the ferry. They were watching the barrels on the railway. But the ferryboat itself was not guarded at all.
At 10 o'clock on a quiet Sunday morning, the ferryman cast off from the dock on schedule. "45 minutes later, at the appointed spot, a blast tore through the bottom of the boat.
It was a very, very hard blow, and the ferry rapidly rose. And the cargo on the ferry, they were railway wagons, you see, so they rushed down and tilted the ferry still more.
Within moments, the mortally damaged ferry had sunk beneath the surface, carrying with it innocent passengers and Nazi Germany's atomic ambitions.
The heavy water being on board went down with the ship, and it's still on the bottom of the Tincha Lake.
Later, the Allies would learn that the Nazis were never close to an atomic breakthrough. The U.S. won the A-bomb race. Within months of the German defeat, America dropped the first atomic bomb. But in the Allies' hands, the bomb helped to win a war, not perpetuate one. If Hitler had the bomb, he might have used it to devastate the world. The Norwegian resistance fighters did their part to stop him. Their mission was one of the greatest feats of sabotage in military history. Something that had to be done at all costs, and was.
You have to fight for your freedom and for peace. It's not something that you have every day. You have to fight for it every day to keep it. It's like a glass bowl. It's very easy to break. It's easy to lose.
Half a world away, on December 7th, 1941, Americans learned the cost of freedom when Japan devastated Pearl Harbor. That sneak attack included the stealth weapons of their day, midget submarines. They were sleek, deadly, and until now, consigned to history. The National Park Service and the U.S. Navy have searched for the wreck of a Japanese midget submarine. An hour before the Japanese savaged Pearl Harbor, a U.S. destroyer sank the tiny vessel. The encounter could have warned American forces that bombs and torpedoes were about to rain on Battleship Row, but it did not.
Now hold that. Shift her around.
Marine archaeologist Dan Lenehan directed the hunt for the midget sub. Jim Delgado was the project's historian. Their collaboration grew out of earlier research below the surface of Pearl Harbor. They searched for evidence of a bygone conflict, a battle waged underwater by 5 midget submarines. One sub played a special role.
And what's particularly exciting about the midget sub that's outside the entrance is it would have represented the first exchange of hostilities between the United States and Japan in World War II. And because remember that this sub was sunk an hour before the planes attacked Pearl Harbor. An incredibly important, significant find if we could do it.
The search for the midget sub focused on a square mile of debris-laden bottom. The area is a graveyard of war relics, like this old Navy plane. 1,000 feet down in the darkness, everything begins to resemble a sub. But what they're looking for is 80 feet long and 6 feet across. It carried 2 torpedoes and was manned by an officer and a navigator.
They were going to come on in, sit and wait, and then when the attack occurred, when the planes came in, when all hell broke loose in Pearl Harbor, they would surface, fire their torpedoes, wreak as much havoc as they could, swing around Ford Island, head back on out, and then rendezvous with their mother subs to be taken back to Japan.